stand up and give your name.
Oh, wow.
Linda Hawkins.
Kay Danger.
Margaret Beach. Juanita Knight. She said visitors. I don't know if I'm a visitor or not. Are we visitors?
Are you a member of the, you're a member?
No, if you're a member, that's okay. Well, we're so happy to have you, and we hope that you'll consider joining our organization. We're trying really hard to do some good things here in town with our museum, and we would love for you to be part of it. We need volunteers for the museum, but in order to be a volunteer, you have to be a member of the organization. So it's $20 for an individual, $30 for a couple, and $50 for commercial. But anyway, we're so glad to have you here. And at this time, John, would you lead us in prayer?
Dear God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this organization. We just ask your blessings upon all that is done here today. I ask that you keep everyone safe and healthy, and we give you all the praise. In Christ's name, amen.
At this time, if you'll stand, we'll pledge allegiance to the flag. We have the flag this time, or you'd have to bring that little bitty. Ready, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Ginger, would you read our minutes, please?
Excuse me, I got a lot of stuff here to keep up with, and it all falls out sometimes. The Historical Society met November the 18th, 2021 at the
Would you
Methodist
turn around
Church.
so they can hear you?
Sorry. The Historical Society met November the 18th, 2021 at the Methodist Church. Joan Bassett called the meeting to order. John Grant gave the invocation. New members were Janice Boone, Hilda Head, and Alan Stewart were welcomed. Myra Sharp reported $6,104.65 in the Treasury. Members were informed of a new updated flyer of the Historical Homes Tour guide. Mrs. Bassett added that meetings and activities will be published in Town Topics of the Poplarville Democrat. Also, there will be no December meeting. The guest speaker, Larry Davis, presented a history of dairy farms in Pearl River County. Mr. Davis displayed antique milking equipment as well as more modern electrical machinery and explained the functions. Some equipment displayed were a Sears and Roebuck wheel, which was used to draw water to clean the milk cans before electricity was brought to the rural areas. Milk had to be chilled to 35 degrees to prevent spoiling, so the milk was transferred to the ice house in town by cart or truck. The Davis farm was established in 1812 and homestead in 1865. After the Civil War, additional property was added through a federal land grant. In 1938, Larry's grandfather started the dairy business. The soil was rich after the timber had been cut. This was ideal conditions for growing corn and grass to feed cattle. In the 30s, after much of the timber in the county had been cut, L.O. Crosby helped finance many dairy farms. At that time, there were about 385 dairies and a processing plant in Picayune. During Prohibition, many farmers supplemented their income by producing moonshine, which was actually more profitable. The moonshine was stored in milk cans and marked so delivery trucks would not take them to the processing plant. When electricity was available to the rural areas, modern stainless steel machinery and refrigeration made it possible to produce more milk. Mr. Crosby helped farmers acquire equipment, genetic top-grade bulls, or artificial insemination. These items could be purchased through catalogs. The best cattle for dairies are Holstein with 2% cream and Jersey with 3.5% cream. In 1950, there were 185 dairies in Pearl River County. The milk belt of the South extended from Greene County to Tylertown, Mississippi. Today, due to expensive equipment, land prices, cost of fuel, and transportation problems. Only 3 dairies exist in Pearl River County.
Didn't even know we had three.
So, and it was very interesting.
Where are those three, Ginger, do you know?
I have no idea. We need Larry to inform us.
Well, they closed down in country, Grove, but I understand somebody else bought it, so
Okay,
it may be that is maybe still one of them, I'm not sure.
and maybe a couple of them south part of the county.
And let me mention one thing, I don't know, some of you may know April Greco, she
Yeah.
was in the chamber. She's working on a dairy that would do the delivery, like the,
Uh-huh.
yeah, in the glass bottles and stuff.
Okay, that's
Interesting.
interesting. Save those bottles when they become antiques.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, they stand approved as read. Myra's not here today. She had to take her husband for a procedure at the hospital. So, but our treasury report, we now have $6,049.33 in our treasurer. And I do want to mention, for those of you who are visiting with us, we do have a newsletter, and we want to thank Brenda Wells, who does a beautiful job of this, and she emails this out to all of our members every month. So if you haven't seen it, you might want to just look at one of them on the table there. I put it there so you could see what all we are doing. We did get the museum reopened, and then we had to shut it down again because of the COVID and the really bad cold weather. We have to keep it at a certain temperature in there, because if not, the artifacts will disintegrate and ruin. And it's so cold, I just hated to ask people to work in it when it's freezing in the museum and freezing outside. But anyway, I wanted to thank all of you that did come and work, because I knew it really was hard on you, and I appreciate it.
But it's back open.
Yes, that's
Oh,
just what I was going to say. We've now finally opened again. We have 2 new exhibits. One is the history of the Poplarville Garden Club, and the other one is local Black history. We realize February is Black History Month, but we couldn't get all of it together because we were having a hard time even getting the information. But we're going to extend that past February, needless to say. And I do want to thank all of you that's been coming and helping at the museum. We had a group of ladies that, and we've mentioned them, we will have them mentioned, I think, in this month's brochure, who have really worked hard to get the museum back open and get our new exhibits up. It takes a lot of work to do all of this, and if it weren't for the ladies to come and help us, I don't know, we couldn't do it. But I wanted to thank you. In new business, I have something very exciting to tell you. Would you please stand up, Carol? I don't know if all of you know Carol Williams or not, but she has been really a godsend to our historical society. She puts out all the publicity for us and does anything like that we ask her to do. But she also has written a grant for us, and it was to Coastal Electric, isn't it?
Coastal
And
Electric.
guess what? We had exciting news. We just learned we are getting the money. So I'm just so excited about it.
Thank you.
It's all due to her.
It's only because I have learned how to write grants through Backpack, and if I had not learned how to do that, I wouldn't have been fortunate enough to do this for y'all, but it should make a big difference, I hope. But I was here yesterday at the church when I got the news, and I screamed, and the preacher came running down the hall to see if something was wrong. So you are very welcome, and I hope we can do some more at some other
Well,
places.
you'll never know how much we appreciate all you do for us.
And also you got more than you asked for, correct?
How much? What did you get?
Well, we're keeping that a little secret.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a considerable amount of money.
We
Let's just
don't
say.
want to publicize that because of other people getting grants,
sorry,
and they may
leave
not
it to
get
me.
as much or
Well, I
that
think,
sort of
yeah,
thing.
okay.
I will tell you this, the amount we're getting is only going to cover 2 showcases and a few mannequins. So that lets you know how expensive some of this equipment to be museum quality equipment. It's very expensive. And, but we do hope to have enough for 2 showcases. These showcases have to have museum quality glass. It's just a lot. And what is so ironic is Ginger had texted me that the church, Birchtown Church of Jesus Christ, had a showcase for sale. And this is before we found out about the grant. And did we want to make an offer? And I said, definitely. So I offered them $100, and they took it. So now I have to have some help. Next Wednesday, I talked to the pastor there, and he said that he works, so he has to be there for them to load it for us on a truck. So we need a truck and some help. And if any of you have a truck and can help us, we certainly do need it.
I have a truck.
What we would have to do is go to Carrier. He gets off and he's at home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So he would help load it, and some of his men down there. We bring it up here, but getting back that late in the afternoon, the city workers are gone. So it would have to stay overnight in the truck, and then maybe the next morning we can get the city workers to unload it at the museum. But think about it, if you,
I'm open to it, I mean, that's.
oh, that's wonderful. Well,
And
after,
you have a garage to put
I have
it in? Thing.
well, when we get through meeting today, if you'll
Okay.
get with me,
Sure.
that'd be wonderful.
Excuse me.
Anyway, we got one for $100, so that's wonderful.
Did you talk with him, because they have another one?
Yes, but he said must have stuff piled on there, so he
Okay,
said they
they
couldn't get to it
yeah.
yet. So we'll see, but anyway, I did tell you about the 2 new exhibits, and I think, is there any other business that we need to talk about, anybody? If not, I'd like to, most of you know who I am. This is Luann Powell Lee, and Dr. Powell's daughter, and we're so happy to have you with us, Luann. Thank you.
It is such a pleasure to be here. I'm going to drag this over if it's not
here, let me go.
too heavy. That's perfect.
Got it?
I just wanted to get kind of close to you. You're good, you're good. Several of you have already come up and given me a hug and whispered something in my ear about my dad. So before I even get started, I'd like to ask you, I don't want to just lecture you, I don't want to just talk. If you have something that pops in your mind, because I've already had 3 or 4 really valuable pieces pop into my ear, special people today. And if you want to say something when I'm talking about something, just join in. I'd rather it be that kind of a relaxed thing than me just telling you about my wonderful daddy. This is an absolute joy, thrill for me to do. I don't have a lot of his things. First of all, let me go by my little notes and try to follow some kind of order here. A little bit about me. I don't know everybody, so just a little bit about me and who I am and what I'm even doing here. I was born and raised here in Poplarville. This is home. This will always be home. I've even thought over the last 3 or 4 years of moving back, and I don't make big decisions quickly. I never do. I always pray about them, talk about them. I even get a legal pad and I do the pro column and the con column and write it down so I can look at it, because it's a big deal. I lost my husband 11 years ago, and so it would be by myself moving, and I just don't know with all the stuff in my house if I can even face that. But I've got to mention Becky right off the top of the bat too. Becky is got to be, there's several right at the top of the list all time. Becky is one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. Born and raised together. Not necessarily born. I was born here. Were you born here? Okay, but we were basically born and raised together. She is a lifetime sister that I never had. And we have a little group of 8 of us
online. I call it, with my friends in Slidell, where I've been living for 30-plus years now, I call it Golden Girls Online. And that's what we are. And we get together, it's a little group text, and we get together almost every night, even if it's just to say, checking in, everybody doing okay? Sometimes we pray together online. Sometimes we just laugh together online. We keep news up with each other, needs here and there, and laugh a lot. Like I said, and pray we do prayers online. But she is just, I can't say enough about her and her dad. I almost feel a little, her daddy was awesome too. So I'm just sharing because I was asked to talk about my dad. Her dad was just as awesome. And I hope surely in the future you're going to have Becky talk as well. Poplarville was so lucky to have two really, really super guys as the two doctors here for all the years that they practiced, and how much they cared about their patients. And like I said, one of my best friends. I have a short little story and you're in it. So lifetime friends here, and Brenda as well. We just kind of had a lot in common growing up, and sisters at heart. So I was born and raised here. I have prayed a lot about coming back up until pretty recently, and I've gotten my answer over 3 years, and I'm staying in Slidell. It has become home. I've been there 35-ish years. I think, what am I going to, what's good about going to Poplarville? What's not good about going to Poplarville? And my list, kind of does this, and I can't imagine leaving my church. I have a wonderful church, and that's really my family in Slidell. I am blessed with friends. And to be honest, I kind of got the best of both worlds. Really, I'm not giving up a thing. I just don't have it in me to move, build, move, look for houses. I just don't have it in me. But Slidell has become home. And I'm in touch with my besties every night online. And I can come up here so easy. And I do run up here sometimes just to go see Mom and Dad. Go check on the cemetery and whatever. So I will be staying in Slidell, but I'm just 45 minutes down the road. They've even promised to come take care of me if something happens to me. It's like, well, are y'all going to come check on me? And yes, of course they will. I went from here to USM in Hattiesburg, and I got my music major degree, ended up in Vicksburg after that. I was assistant band director at a very large high school in Vicksburg at Warren Central High. We marched about 250. It was quantity, but also quality. It was a straight one band. We always made straight ones. It was a wonderful experience. And if any of you happen to remember the band director that was, hey Rita, that was our band director when we were in high school, his name was John Waite, and it was a great band. Well, I went to Vicksburg to be his assistant. So I was John's assistant director after I finished high school and got out of USM. I ended up, long story short, I ended up in Slidell, which was meant to be. God was in the middle of that. I knew it was kind of a weird thing how I ended there, but that's where I was meant to be. And I was in the school system for 38 years. Retired 7 years ago. After that, I knew I wanted to go back out to the heart hospital. Some of you might have been or known someone at the Louisiana Heart Hospital. I knew that one day, whenever that day was going to be, that I was going to go out and volunteer there. Because my husband was there for almost 3 solid years. I mean, I'm talking solid years. He'd go in for 2 weeks and come home for 3 days. He'd go in for 8 days and come home for 2. That just became life before we ended up in Houston. So anyway, I knew one day I've got to go back and give back to those people. They became family. It was a wonderful place. And I did, but I got to call my own hours. I'm not a morning person at all. So I said, I'll come in about 11, 12, and then I'll stay till 6 or 5 or 6, 7, whatever you need. And that's what I was doing when a job fell in my lap, and I ended up being the assistant to the CEO. And it was one of the happiest. I love the environment. Medicine was always my second choice, but I knew, actually it was my first choice. I was going to be a doctor like my daddy, but I hit junior high and thought, math and science was not going to work. It was not my stream. Can't do it, not going there. Got to do something else. Because the numbers, and that was not my thing. So ended up working for him until it closed. And God answered a prayer again, and because I'm not ready to stay home and do nothing in retirement, but I'm working with a nonprofit in Slidell now. It's called Stark of Louisiana, and we have our clients. We have about 900 clients. It's a large nonprofit for the whole parish. We have a campus in Mandeville, campus in Slidell, and we have like 4 group homes. There's just supported employment. It's for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And some of my former students from my junior high school are there, and it's just so cool, because once you were a kid of mine at school, you were my kid forever, and they're in their 30s and 40s now, but they're still my kids. I still go over there and play with them, whatever. So that's enough about me. I'm a little biased. You're gonna, you know, I just think Daddy was the best, and I hope that everybody feels that way about their dads. I never read the book that Tom Brokaw wrote, but I know the name of it was The Greatest Generation, I think. I think I might even have the book somewhere. But this has stirred, just preparing for this has stirred up a lot in me, that I want to read that book now. They're doing research and kind of getting back, you know, pulling all this stuff out. So he definitely, to me, was in the greatest generation. That's that World War II bunch of guys that are recognized as the greatest generation. He was born in Pittsburgh, Texas, and passed away long after his retirement in Bay St. Louis at the camp, his place of love, his happy place. He moved as a young boy to a little bitty town in Arkansas called Louisville, Lewis, and it's about 20-25 miles from Texarkana. If you know where Hope is, it's like 15 miles from Hope. It's in that bottom right southeast corner, and that's where he met Mom. There was I thought y'all might enjoy this, but this is Mom and Dad in the center in elementary school, and what I did was to save this stuff is I have the box of family old. I mean, like they're faded and you can't even see an awful lot of them. But I thought, you know, I live in hurricane land, and you know, you want to grab your things and get out of town on the big hurricanes, and it's like, you know, there's stuff I just want to be able to grab fast and get out of here. So I went through, years ago, I went through the pictures, and I thought, I'm just going to find my favorite pictures. And a friend of mine owned a quilt shop and got me started in this. I haven't done many quilts, and this is actually kind of what grabbed me with the quilts, was the pictures. And I got all my favorites, and we lined them up, and what have you, and there's a process to transfer it over. But I got them as elementary kids, and then I've got them as, about the time I got married, and then what I kind of remember there, and Daddy and some other people you'll recognize too. But he was my hero, and I just didn't think he could do anything much wrong. I really didn't. So I thought, you know, okay, how do I describe Daddy to people who don't know him? Is there anybody here who did not know him? I'm sure there are, because their faces I don't know. So I came up with just a few little topics of words to talk, you know, describe my daddy. And the first one that comes to my mind is godly. He was a godly, and that was first in his life. That came first. He read his Bible often. He went to Centenary College. Is that Shreveport? Shreveport area? He went there before he enlisted in the Army. And I think he took a lot of theology classes. He knew his Bible, and he loved his Bible. I don't think a Christmas went by without him sitting and reading his Christmas story, you know, as a family. So that's was the basis, I think, of everything that he did. He truly lived by that saying, if you can't say something nice about someone, don't say it at all. He talked about, and he didn't. I never heard him say a negative word. The strongest he would get, I don't think there's a subject untouched that he and I didn't talk about together. Truly, there was so much love, there was so much trust, there was so much respect. We had some deep conversations that were just treasured by me. He was in the medicine field for all the right reasons. I worked there in the summers. I worked at his office in the summers sometimes, and I was always at the front desk. And he didn't work off, I don't know about your dad, but I don't think back then doctors even worked off of appointments. If you need to see the doctor, you go. And you just, Wells, Daddy's nurse, would pull the card, or I would pull that card that day, put it in line, and it was first come, first served. But if you're here, he'll see you. It might be tonight, but he'll see you. And that was every day. I remember the first time I started doing that, and that allowed Doyle Smith, if you remember, Doyle was that front window person, to go in the back and do some bookkeeping. And I enjoyed doing it as well, learned a lot in the process. But he would, I realized how many people, and I would count at the end of the day, like, oh my goodness, Daddy, you saw 70 people today. And he said, that's about average. I remember that. And some days he would make it home for lunch. Mom would have lunch ready for him, or he'd call her and say, I'm not coming home for lunch today. I'm just going to work through it. Whatever. Patients came first. And that, again, to me, God was in the middle of every bit of that. He was being in education as long as I was, the word engaged is a real big word, buzzword in education. To engage your learner, to engage your listener. And I love the word because I can look back to this history and know Daddy was such an engaged listener. He didn't just give you lip service. If he was, you were talking to him about something. It wasn't like, oh yeah, what? Oh yeah. And then, oh, what'd you say? Say that again? That's not what you're going to get when you were talking to him. He was with you. And he was totally engaged with what you were saying and listening, responding. People aren't like that all the time today. And that stands out to me. I had to put that one in there. But he didn't charge an awful lot of people. I don't know who knows that, if anybody knows that, but the way it was set up, the window was right here, and I would check them in, pull their card, and then he would finish, the 3 rooms were in the back, and he stood at a little thing, like a little desk like this, but the patients checking out couldn't see him. He was just standing there writing on the card, writing notes on the card, and he would hold up fingers as to how much to charge them. And I would look at he knew that's who was at the door, at the window, and how many times he'd just go, and that meant nothing. And it was the barter system was huge back then. It was very common for him to come in the door at lunch, if I was home, or whatever age I was, and he'd have a big old bag of vegetables. There were farmers that would come by and say, I'll never forget Mr. Kerry Kirkland, if you remember Kerry Kirkland. He used to come by the house twice a year. Loved that man to death, in his overalls, good as gold, and he'd come in and Mom would make him coffee, and they would sit at the breakfast table and drink coffee and talk. And he wanted one time of the year, it was when Miss Mary Lou, how you want your side of beef cut up. They were fixing to do, slaughter cows. So once a year he came and put a whole side of beef in our freezer. And then the other one was in the spring, and he'd come and they'd have their coffee and talk and visit, and he'd say, Miss Mary Lou, what do you want planted in your garden this year? Well, she loved vegetables, so that was her favorite time of the year. But all the time, people paying any way they could. All he wanted was a thank you. He was in it for the right reasons, and I think that generation was that way. It wasn't just Daddy, it was that generation that is kind of long gone. He made house calls every afternoon. I think my memory serves me correct, it's before they were in nursing homes. So if you had an elderly parent somewhere that was bedridden, that couldn't come to the office and sit in the waiting room. So he had his Monday route, his Tuesday route. I don't remember if it was 4 days or whatever, but I used to go with him. When I was little, before I got to junior high, I got real involved in school, and he'd swing by and pick me up, and we'd go make those. He knew every little back room in the county. And I knew all the animals at the house we were going to, and then I'd just sit and watch TV, talk to the family while he's checking on the, grandma in the back room. And house calls today, it was just a whole generation back. So he, like I said, he lived by that. If you can't say anything nice, don't say it at all. I remember, I didn't know if I was going to share this, but I think I will. A very unpleasant thing about Poplarville was the there was a book that came out that was called Blood Justice. And there was a man at the church that Daddy was cordial to, nice to. Daddy wasn't ugly to anybody. But I could sense when he wasn't crazy about somebody. And like I said, there was no conversations that we didn't have. We were just free to talk. And I remember as a young girl one day saying, "You don't really like him, do you, Daddy?" And he said, "Oh, honey, that's not it. That's not it at all." And I said, "Well, I feel something different." He said, "No, I just don't care for him, that's all." That was as strong as he ever got. I just don't. Well, then the book comes out, and that person's name was weaved in and out all through that book. It was like, took me years to understand why there was some apprehension there. But it wasn't that he didn't like him, he just didn't care for him. That was, like I said, that was about his, and I only heard that one time. So he always saw the good in people. He always saw, he always would give you a shirt off his back. He was always trying to help others. He was one of 5 kids. And I never heard, it's funny, when you look, you see life sure differently at 60, almost 7 than you do at 15, don't you? But you look back, and he was so different than the other 4. The other 4, I'm just going to say it like I know to say it. They just were into everything for themselves. He was like, I called him the black sheep of the family, thank goodness. That's what I said. You're the black sheep of that family, thank goodness. And that's what I always told him. Because my Uncle Bill and my Aunt May, his brother and sister, were big antique collectors. And Uncle Bill probably had, Daddy used to tell me, oh, he's got a couple $1 million worth of antiques in that house. It's kind of junky looking to me, because there was so much stuff around. But it was quality stuff. Well, Aunt May liked that too, but she didn't have the money Uncle Bill had built up. But she would do, like she would call Bill. I remember her calling Daddy. She was so mad at her brother Bill because she had found like a set of china or something at some sale somewhere. She couldn't pass up a garage sale on the side of the road. But she had found some, and she wanted Bill, the brother, who knew real good stuff, she wanted him to go look at them and tell her if it's worth the money they're asking for it. Well, he went and looked, but he bought it out from under her. It's like, that wasn't very nice. So he was so different. I never heard him talk about his mom, good or bad. It was just kind of, I've tried to think, he really never said much about her. Certainly not negative, but not a whole lot, just not a whole lot. And I remember he was a fabulous cook, if you didn't know that. Fabulous cook. And I remember asking him one time, Daddy, how'd you learn to do that? Where did you learn to cook? How'd you learn to fix that car out there? Where did you cook? Where did you do that? Well, you're supposed to be a doctor, but they do all this other stuff. And I said, how'd you learn to cook? How'd you learn to do this? And he said, well, and he was the youngest of the 5. And he said, well, it's just something my mother expected for me to do for the family every night. So I kind of was like, I'm not real sure if he being the youngest, what the thing was there. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. But his daddy, on the other hand, he must have taken after his daddy because I never met him. But he worked on the railroad, and his nickname was Doc. And my daddy always talked about, he used to go to work with his dad. And apparently he had a whole bunch of guys underneath him. He was a supervisor of some kind. And he said, Daddy always took such good care of his workers and his men. He couldn't say that enough. And he would say tell me all the things that my granddad that I didn't know, had done for them. He over and over about how much he took care of people, and how much he cared about people, and what he would do for his workers. So my assumption is he was the black sheep that took after his daddy. That's what I'm assuming. And he certainly fit that profile. Another word that I think of when I think of Daddy, y'all jump in anytime you want to share, is family. My family daddy. He was a godly daddy. He was a family daddy as well. As much as I was involved in high school, junior high and high school, piano recitals, dance recitals, band concert, I don't ever remember him not being there. but yet he saw 70 to 80 patients a day, and he did house calls, and he delivered babies all, 2 or 3 nights a week, and he did emergency room. They didn't have emergency room doctors. They shared, Dr. Stringer and Daddy shared that. They took turns being the ER, the doctor on call. And I don't ever remember him not being there. He was the most supportive. And anything I'm saying goes for my mom as well. I'm just staying focused on Dad. But they were the most supportive. When it came time for studying for a test, though, for some reason it was usually Daddy. And I would always write my questions that were going to be on the test with an answer, and I'd take them to him and say, Daddy, call them out to me, call them out to me. Because this one always made 99s and 100s, and I was kind of the 95, 96 girl. And it just drove me crazy. I never told her that. And so we would practice, we would study and whatever. Well, a couple of days later, he would say, how'd you do on your test? You hadn't told me. You got your grade back yet? And I said, yeah, I made a 96. Good girl. I knew you knew the stuff. You knew every bit of it. And I go, Becky made a 99. Every single time, she'd outdo me by 3 or 4 points. And the 2 things I want to point out on this one is how supportive he was, and kind of how he molded my life and my viewpoints, because that happened a lot, because she made 99s and 100s all the time, right, Mr. Grant?
Pretty much.
Smart girl. He would laugh, because that was just kind of she made 99. And he would say, okay, look at me. And I'd look at him, and he'd say, did you do your best? I said, Daddy, I did my best. He said, that's all anybody wants. He always supported whatever I was doing. If I made a mistake, if I play piano at church, if I made a mistake, Daddy, did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you do your best? I did do my best. That's all anybody wants. So that became a really built-in thought for me, is if you do your best, and I used it 38 years with kids at school. Did you do your best? Whatever your best is, nobody can ask any more than that. And don't ask any more of yourself than that if you did the best you could do. There has to be, the other point was, there has to be a little piece of me that's insecure. People that know me say, oh no, because I'm the kind, especially now, we've all had bumps in our life, bumps in the road, major bumps, every single person. And I kind of chose to, along the way, my husband was super ill for 5 years, and everybody's had stuff, everybody has it. But you kind of hit a spot that you've got to make a choice. And one thing I said to kids for 38 years was, at the end of the day, it's all about the choices you make, no matter what. No matter if Susie was ugly to you today. If you got mad and hit her, that was a choice you made. It wasn't a ticket to hit her. That type thing. It was about, at the end of the day, it's about the choices you make. And I made the choice not to get stuck and angry and to be happy. I have been happy my whole life. I mean, I had a wonderful childhood. When those bumps came along, the first bump that came along was a stepson. It was quite some challenge that I didn't have the skills to deal with it because my childhood was so happy. And those bumps come along and it's like, okay, you can walk away and give up, or you can figure it out and look at things as positively as you can, look at that glass half full and make the best of it, and choose to be happy. It is a choice you make. And like I said, for 38 years I worked with kids. That's probably the foundation of how I live. And especially through my husband's last illness, where he was full-time in the hospital in Houston for the last 2 years waiting for a heart transplant. And he did this. He would crash and he would come back fine. Crash. We did this. So I hit a spot with that was truly, he and I have had those down-to-earth talks too. And your odds of getting a heart, they told us you're 50-50. I mean, it's a 50-50 shot. But we knew we did everything. We had a chance to have all those talks. And we chose to look at it as like having a baby. Not, it's 50%, this isn't going to work. That's not how we looked at it at all. We looked at it in positive. And, when you get home with your new heart, what you're going to do. And course, I was trying to be a cheerleader for him, but that's just how we approach things. Together as a couple, and after, especially, I guess, after he passed away, but it came back to my daddy. You know, I learned through the bumps of life how to smile and laugh and be happier. It releases what in your head? Sorry, I'm a brainy girl here. It makes you feel better. And I do laugh and cut up a lot, and it's a choice I make. I'm probably sillier than I've ever been, and I kind of call it the Houston brain because that was so traumatic for a while. But I've also chosen to live for today, and I don't worry about tomorrow. I mean, that was survival. And leaning back on what Daddy said, have you done everything you could? Did you do your best? Just being supportive and being supportive of myself. Lou, take today. I can't even deal with tomorrow. I can't even deal with tonight. We're on a vent. We're on, whatever. And let's just deal with this morning. Let's get from here till noon and look at the good things. And I really feel like I learned how to do that. And live just today. And I treasure right this very moment being able to be in front of every one of you. I am no more thinking about tomorrow or tonight what I'm going to eat. And I live in the world of wonderful food, obviously. But that's something that I've seen looking back and all the reflection I've done. It started with my daddy. And I just carried it on through. The other thing he would do is if I did say, I don't know if I can do that, he would say, you can do anything. And I must have heard that a million times. Well, if somebody asked me to draw something, if somebody asked me to do something, I wasn't really sure. Everybody's not good at everything. And I said, I don't know if I can do that. I actually said that to myself before coming here. I don't know if I can do that. How many people, asked Brenda, how many people are going to be there? And I could just hear Daddy saying, do anything you put your mind to. You can do anything. And that, along with did you do your best, that's how my daddy lived and what he passed on to me. He was a natural counselor because he was such an active, engaged listener. I think about a time that I was in high school and there was a girlfriend. She was not in our class, another grade. He got along with us, with the kids so good. She had some problems and some that had not really been recognized yet. And her friends had, we used to go to Hattiesburg, go get pizza and a movie. They would let us drive to Hattiesburg to do that. And they were a little afraid to take her home. And because there was something wrong. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know what to do. She was a little out of control. They didn't know what to do. And they came by my house like 10 or 11 at night and knocked on the door when we were a late night house and watched the news and then went to bed. But so we were all still up, but they came and knocked. They didn't hesitate to come by the house and say, Dr. Powell, we need to see you. And that just spoke to me that somebody, a group of my friends in another grade and, 2 or 3 grades away, that's where they came to ask for help at night, was we don't know what's going on and we need some help. And I just thought that was super special. He loved kids. He loved, for years and years and years and years and years, we had the camp that was his love, his happy place. And I would take girlfriends, my class down, and he would teach them to ski. I was not a morning person, so I slept in, but he would be out in the river. He said, we started at 7 o'clock this morning. And I'd look out in the river, and there he's got a whole boat full of girls. And so over the years, there were always large groups of girls down there learning how to ski. He had the patience of Job. He just would be out on the river all day long teaching them to ski. Patience with a smile on his face. Somebody would get up a little bit and fall, and he'd just smile and come back. Let's try it again. Let's try it again. Patience, patience, patience. The next word was, what else? And it's hero. It's my U.S. hero daddy. And that's what I have the most of on display to actually look at. He was an Army medic and a medical I'm going to have to look at some of these notes. In a medical detachment of the 393rd Infantry. And I have his folder that had some of his stuff in it. This was his discharge papers from the Army. And do you know, nowhere on here does it have his date of birth. Back then, the date of birth must not have been important. And he didn't even have a date of birth. He didn't even have a birth certificate. He said his daddy's nickname was Doc. And he said, I don't even know where it is. I remember this was ages ago, but he'd say, I have no idea where it is because all the doctor wrote was son born to Doc Powell on this date and year. That was it, the doctor signed it. So there's not even a birth certificate. And nowhere on here does it say what his date of birth was. I thought that was interesting. But I got some specifics off of that. He was a surgical tech. I knew that. He came home, just like Becky's dad did, actually doing surgeries. And I asked him, I said, how'd you learn to do that in the war? He said, look, there was people that needed it and they just showed you what to do and you just had to learn to do it right there on the spot. But he also, being in that position, and wasn't your daddy a medic? He's a medic. Corpsman?
Corpsman in the Navy, and the Marines didn't have them, so he was actually in the Marines.
Okay, but in the medical unit?
Yes.
Yeah.
And my father-in-law was too, he was a corpsman.
Dr. Day, absolutely. So he also had to crawl to the front lines on his belly and drag people back, you know, that needed attention. So he was doing both of those, surgery and the front line dragging them back. On here it says the countries that he went to, because I wanted to share that. He went to several countries in Europe. He went to Normandy, he was there during the D-Day. Northern France, Rhineland. I had never heard of Rhineland. Anybody heard of Rhineland? So I Googled it. I had to write it up.
German?
It's a strip of German, bingo, German land that borders France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The area was deemed a demilitarized zone to increase the security of France, Belgium, and Netherlands from the German aggression, from Hitler. So he was in Rhine, was a little strip of German land. And then it says, and Mr. Grant, you may have to help me with this. I Googled his name and have no idea how to say it. It's Ardennes. It looks like Ardennes. I don't know how to say it, but it was a place. So I started Googling it to find out more about it. I know where it was and what happened there, don't know how to say it. And other areas of Central Europe. This Ardennes is where the Battle of the Bulge took place. And this short little thing I found that explained it more says, in late December of 1944, German forces staged a massive drive to recapture lost areas in that, it says the Ardennes region of Belgium, France, and Luxembourg to turn the tide of the war. Ultimately, it was unsuccessful. The offensive lasted from December of 44 to January of 45. When the Allies won a decisive victory in the campaign. Although it was known as the Battle of the Bulge, the Allies officially called this the Ardennes counteroffensive, if that helps at all. So I don't think it's a real country, it's just kind of a region. I do remember asking him, you know, were you ever scared? And he said, well, yeah. and I said, what was the scaredest you ever were? And he said he was going to the front, and he said a bullet hit his helmet. And I said, how'd you know that? I mean, I know that's a stupid question, but I was 13, 14 years old. But I said, he said, because my helmet spun on my head, and I knew it happened. So I almost went here. He did receive, on this discharge, he did receive some awards, medals. I tried to look those up. That's a long one. I did try to look those up to see what those were for. He got a Purple Heart. But I'm sure Becky probably knows this too. They didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about the war very much. He told 2 or 3 little funny stories, again trying to focus on, you know, staying on the positive side of things. The one I remember the most, that he would share those, but he didn't talk about the tragedy and the death and destruction. He talked about, he was at the front lines on his belly one night, and he said there was a trench dug. And he said there was a drunk soldier. They don't know which side he was from. They don't know who it was. There was a drunk soldier in the trench. And he had gotten an American helmet, or U.S. helmet, and a German helmet. He had that. And he had like a stick. And they said, of course, it was deep enough that you were completely underground. And said he would run with the ones, you know, with the U.S. helmet. And you could hear just all the German going crazy. And then he'd run
with the other one, and then listen to the others. He said that went on for hours. He said it just went on for hours one night, and of course it got funny. And he said it really wasn't funny because there were bullets just flying everywhere. But he focused on that, on the lighter things as he possibly could. I found, this is an original, obviously, an article that was published in the Shreveport. This is just one of the medals that I have some documentation of. Tech 3 Joe H. Powell receives an award for gallantry. It's not very long, y'all. Tech Joe H. Powell and his number of Shreveport, Louisiana, recently was awarded the Oak Leaf Cluster to a Bronze Star for gallantry in action. He's the husband of Mary Lou Powell, such and such avenue in Shreveport, Louisiana. Citation or description of incident for which he was awarded the medal follows. Tech 3 Joe H. Powell, his number again, on August the 29th, 1944, near Brest, France, a call was received from Company C, 9th Infantry, that litter bearers were needed to evacuate casualties. At the time, it was impossible for the 1st Battalion Medical Section to reach Company C. It was necessary to ask for volunteers from the Regimental Medical Section. Tech 3 Powell, the pharmacist in charge of the aid station, volunteered and was also given charge of a litter squad. Upon arriving at Company C, it was found impossible to reach some of the casualties due to heavy enemy concentrated machine gun and mortar fire. Tech 3 Powell ordered his litter squad to take cover, and then he crawled 150 yards under artillery fire to within 50 yards of the enemy lines to reach one of the casualties. Tech 3 evacuated the casualty and successfully got him back to the litter squad. On 12 occasions during that day, Tech 3 Powell's litter squad was needed at Company C. Several times he risked his life to reach casualties. It was necessary to pass in direct view of a German pillbox. In all, this one volunteer litter squad evacuated 12 casualties under heavy enemy machine gun, mortar, and artillery fire from Company C. Tech 3, although physically exhausted, returned to the aid station and was instrumental there in saving numerous lives. He personally gave plasma to 4 casualties and put splints on some of the casualties at the regimental aid station. So that's one that I've got that shows his hero, and wouldn't talk about it. I didn't know this until I started digging and finding things. Like I said, the Purple Heart, I don't know what that was for. A funny situation, he said after the war was over, he told me that they sent sections to different places to wait to be shipped back to the States, and he was sent to Ireland. And he always told me that our Powell roots go to Ireland. And he said, they were just kind of killing time and waiting for however they were going to get home. And he said that he walked in a cleaner's one day to take a uniform and get it cleaned. And he said this lady that worked there looked at him when he came and walked in the door and said, "Well, hey, Joe, how you doing?" And he said, "I'm fine." And she said, "You remember me, right?" And he said, "I've never been here before." And she said, "Yes, you did. You used to come in here 2 or 3 years ago all the time and bring your stuff." And he said, "Man, I've never been to Ireland before. I've been in Europe, and I'm just kind of waiting to go home." He says, "You're Joe Powell, aren't you?" So I thought it was an amazing story. So our roots must go back there. And they say everybody's got a double, but they even have the same names. Once he got home, he always knew he wanted to be a doctor. I think that's why he signed up. They signed up for the medical duty. And he went to LSU Med School at Charity in New Orleans. Charity, I heard him tell so many stories of Charity. I can't say that he loved it. I don't think anybody loved it. But yet his actions told me in a way he did. He really did. He thought the world of that place. He told me up until the day he died, he would say, "If you are ever in New Orleans," because it was pre-Katrina, of course. He passed away in '86, but he told me up until the day he died, he said, "If you're ever in New Orleans and you need medical treatment, you go to Charity." "Are you sure, Daddy?" "I'm positive, don't go anywhere else." "Well, why?" "Because the best of the best of the best are there." that's where you go. And he did all his rotations there. I know he talked stories about being in the ambulance rotation. They took turn, they would have to ride in the ambulance, and to make work fun and to make tragedy bearable, they would have bets, if they could get the person back before they died to the hospital. And, I guess if you're doing that 24/7, when you're in school, you have to make the best of things. But he did love it there. He really, really did, because I think it was just out of respect. So not too terribly long ago, while I was working at Stark, and I'm at the front window, this lady comes in and is asking for something to do with Stark. And I love jewelry. And she had on a necklace like this. And I knew it was special. I knew it didn't look like Brighton or, the brands that we wear. And this is what it looked like. And I said, what is that? Because I could tell somebody had made that on this piece of whatever this is. And I said, what is that? And she said, that's a piece of Charity Hospital. And I said, excuse me? I mean, it was like my daddy was standing right beside me. And I said, what are you talking about? I mean, this is just a few months ago. And she said, well, I think her daughter had gotten her nursing degree there or something. Anyway, her daughter had given it to her. I said, you have to tell me how you got this. So it's a nurse. She's a nurse in New Orleans. They have started gutting Charity. It's in process. I ended up on the phone. I just stayed after it till I found the right person to talk to. They are in the process of doing some gutting. They're going to revitalize that 1 million square foot place. If you've never been there, it's just gigantic. But she had gotten, you pay for it because the money that they're paying for pieces of marble, they sold everything, They sold bathtubs, they sold toilets, they sold everything, windows. They sold everything there was about Charity, and people were going down there like crazy who had done their schooling there, who had worked there. I know that I got a big piece as well that I have kind of on my kitchen counter. And I said, do you know where that came from? And he said, yeah, 8th floor radiology. Because I told him what I wanted it for. I said, look, I want kind of a big piece. I want to be able to put like a candle and something on top of it. I don't want just a little bitty piece. This was perfect. And I pursued it. I sent an email straight to her. So she got one too from the same lady. So we had our Charity piece of jewelry. And she did other things too. You could kind of pick how you wanted it done. But he told me that people were coming in and saying, I worked in radiology, 8th floor. Can I get a piece of marble from there? So they were accommodating. They are still doing that, accommodating. Going up to 8 and trying to find the size of a chunk. They're breaking it in half, and it's kind of got jagged edges on it, but it's so unique and so special. And then he called me and said, I want to ask you if you want this. And I said, look, I feel like my daddy's here with me again. I said, what you got? And he said, I don't know where this came from, and it's thick, but it's marble that came off of walls somewhere. It's heavy, and it's about yay thick. You can see it when you come up. And that they had these, it's real square. It's not just pounded. This is the actual seal of Charity, and that was used on everything. So I went ahead and got it. It's on my coffee table, and in my plans, this will be put in the ground by my daddy's footstone one day. So I will have that put by him. This is, I came across this. It's very old, but this is his class. He's right down in the bottom right corner, very, very young, when he finished school. I found some patches that came off his uniforms. I tried to look up and see. I know these were his because one of his pictures has the Indian on his shoulder. I don't know exactly what that means. I tried to find that as well. I just didn't have enough time to go deep enough. This, I think, was for the tech. I found this one, and it was some type of sergeant. I don't know. He was Tech 3, whatever that was exactly. I don't have many pictures, but there's that. And he never would smile in a picture. I never could get him, all his church pictures that were taken at church, he always had a kind of straight face. This was out at his happy place in the yard by the camp. on the river, and we were headed to church, and I said, Daddy, let me get a good picture of you. So, and because he looked so good, and he had that straight face, and I said, stop it, smile at me. And he broke out laughing, and I caught him. So, this stays in my bedroom, and I see him every morning and every night. I have to do that. So he was, I think I've told you most of this already. Then the other word, caring, fits in there too. The caring and supportive goes together. He was also a fun dad. Yes, please share.
When you were talking about heroes, you
Yes.
know, well, the last thing Joe told me when I left this afternoon coming up, he says, please tell Luann that Dr. Powell was my hero. And when Joe preaches a lot of times, he preaches about heroes. Dr. Powell is one of them. And he was a hero to Joe and I. We were young, didn't have enough sense to get out of the rain, you know, but thought we knew it all, you know. So, and Joe was in seminary, and I was pregnant. And talking about not paying, he wouldn't let us pay. He said, you let Joe preach the word, I'll tend to you. And that was how he was. And then one more thing I wanted to talk about school. He didn't miss any of Luann's performances, I can tell you, because Joe was principal. And Joe had to be there too, at the football games and all that, with Mr. Charles and, you know, everything. And so one time, I think we were over in Columbia at a football game. We were sitting on these old bleachers and everything, you know, and Dr. Powell was sitting with us, and they were fussing about the field. You know, it was like plowed field almost, you know, of course, it wasn't a good football field. And Dr. Powell said, I had to dodge cow patties when I played football. So he said, don't complain. You know, that could be worse. They could be dodging cow patties.
Louie, have you visited our museum?
Not yet.
But we have some, I guess, I don't know what you would call them, but they will identify the medals of each branch of service, and patches too.
I don't have his medals. I only know what's on his discharge
Well, you can
papers.
see what it looked like.
But well, let me tell you a crazy quick story. I have contacted, a while back, several months ago, I actually have contacted him 3 times, the VA's office in Slidell. Because what I wanted to do in my mind, well, it kind of stems from, well, y'all, I'm going to tell it. I'm redoing my will and things. It needs updating. I'm by myself. I'm just trying to get things updated. And come to find out, and I'm not going to tell much about this story. She's looking at me like, are you really going to do this? Are you really going there? Daddy bought 4 plots. Somebody's buried in 2 of them. I was making sure where I was going to be, and somebody's buried in it. I said, excuse me? Yeah, somebody got buried in between, well, there's Mom and Daddy, and there's the other 2. And somebody's buried in the middle of them. So I came up here a whole bunch of times trying to straighten things out, and he's got to, you gotta move him, you gotta move him out. So, long story short, I wanted in my mind so I've been doing this because it's like, those beautiful bronze army things they give you for the army people, military people when they pass away.
Yeah, footstones.
Because he is such a hero, and he is with that greatest generation, like Dr. Stringer. So we have the big Powell, the name Powell, and then Mom and Dad each have a footstone. And I thought, I want to get one of those. I was told it was free, and that all I had to do was show the paperwork, and I get it. Well, I wanted to get one of those to put above the footstone, to show his army and his all that. So they're not real on top of it right now at the VA's office, because they've told me 3 times that they would call me back and make an appointment, and they have it. But I talked to one guy long enough. I said, I have everything. I said, the only problem is, I said, I don't have a birth certificate because he didn't have one. You got his discharge papers. I do have his discharge papers. And, need that and a death certificate.
I said, okay. So my next step on my own was to contact Jackson, Mississippi to get a death certificate. I couldn't find it, couldn't put my hands on it, so I just got another one. So I start looking at his death certificate, and it's wrong. And I don't know how, they tell me it can't be fixed. It's got Joseph Harold Powell. Daddy was not a Joseph. Somebody typing in assumed Joe was a Joseph. So there's big number one bump in the road. And then I got to looking at it last night as I was reading every single line and what this little bitty writing. It says his state of birth is Pennsylvania. And it's like, no, it wasn't. It was Pittsburgh, Texas. Where on earth did Pennsylvania? I was like, Pittsburgh. Somebody said Pittsburgh, and they just typed in Pennsylvania. So his place of birth and his name is wrong. So I called Jackson back and said, you got it wrong. I'm sorry, I've got his army. I know he wasn't Joseph, he was Joe. His family, in all the Arkansas family, mom's side and dad's side, they never called him Joe. His name was Jake. If I ever heard a phone call coming through for Jake, it was family from Arkansas. And the way that came up, J-A-K-E, that's what they called him, because his initials were J-H. J-H, J-H, J-H. And it kind of smeared together as he was growing up to Jake. So it was just kind of a thing that happened, and that was how we, if anybody's asking for Jake, it's somebody from Arkansas that we're kin to. But he was not Joseph, he was Joe. And I've been told I can't fix his death certificate. So it doesn't match his papers. So I don't know that I'm even going to be able to get that I wanted to get, but I'm going to have this put there anyway. So, winding up, I wasn't sure I'd even have enough to talk about, and I'm probably boring you to death. He was fun. I saved this for the last. He was a fun daddy. His passions were football. LSU football, oh my gosh, I grew up in a purple and gold house. And fishing and boating. Those were his passions. And the camp. The camp was the place to be. That was his happy place on earth. We had a camp. Becky's family had one right across the canal. We all had boats. Rennie Moody's daddy had one right across the street. There were several Poplarville people down in Jordan River that had camps, and that was Daddy's saving grace for many, many years while he was still practicing. When I was in high school, he was still practicing in high school. He had a heart attack. I don't know, I guess that did get out. I was already gone from Poplarville, but he had a heart attack and had to retire early. But I was still there, and he would, he would, some nights of the week, a school night, didn't matter. He just needed to get away from the phone, because this was back in the age that the patients called him at home all the time. Any time of the day or night. It's just the way it was. And if he just needed a break, he would go, he'd tell Mom, I'm going to the camp for a little while. I'd grab up all my homework stuff, and we'd head to the camp, and he would get in his lounge chair, overlooking that water, turn his TV on, find a football game, and I'd be up at the kitchen counter doing my homework, and we'd stay till 10:30, and come back home by 11:15. Be home by midnight. That wasn't a big deal at all. But he was a huge football fan. He also had a connection in this little bitty Arkansas town where they grew up to, if any of you happen to remember, Coach Charlie McClendon. Coach Charlie McClendon is not really known anymore because it was so long ago, but he at the time was one of the longest winning coaches at LSU. And I forget the name of that defense that they had. Anyway, that was Charlie's. But Charlie was at LSU for years. And he grew up in the same little bitty town. Daddy played football with him. So I knew him as Charlie. And so he had that connection with the head coach being his friend, and as well as going to LSU med school. I was going to go. I just felt like I should. It was just, in my blood. And we went down there as a junior and when I was a junior and took a tour of LSU, and I'm just a small town girl. It's just way too big for me. And I loved it. I still love LSU. I'm a huge fan, but it was not for me. I had been going to band camps every summer at USM since I was a 6th grader. Spent 3 weeks up there. The Dean of Fine Arts knew me by my first name, and it was like, no, I'm going to Hattiesburg. That was the place for me.
So, but LSU football, he would have the main TV on a football game. He would have, Mom had gotten him a little, because he couldn't watch but one at a time, so he has a smaller TV on a little table that was right beside that had an earphone. And then he'd have a radio down here plugged into this ear. All the time. He had 3 games going on, and at the same time, and I would sit there and watch him. It's like, how does he know what's going on anywhere? And so I would wait till he kind of did one of those big snores and woke up, and I'd go, Daddy, who's winning? Who's winning? Who's winning? And he knew every single thing that was happening everywhere. He knew exactly what was going on. He loved his football. Let's see. Dad, fishing was the other thing. And I have the passion for fishing that he did. I wouldn't let him go without me. We would go out and golf all the time. We'd go out the river sometimes when we just wanted to go wet a hug, but if we were really gonna fish, we went from the camp out through the Bay of St. Louis and out a couple of hours out. We went to Chandelier. We'd go out to the oil rigs and spend the night, and we did some serious fishing. And there's nothing like, how can you get out there and see nothing but water and the sunrise the next morning and wonder why people can't believe in God. You see that scene out there. It's just gorgeous. Mom and I used to worry about Dad. He had had heart surgery by then. And it was like, Mom was like, what if something happens to him out there? And we talked about it. And I said, well, yeah, I do know how to put it on the compass on north, and I won't run into Gulfport, Bay St. Louis. I'll run into something on north. I know that. And I'll get us back in. And she said, are you going to be okay if something happens to him out there? And I said, hey, you got to do what you got to do. I said, is there anywhere else he would rather be? And she said, no, there's not. So she wasn't wild about it, and heck, I wasn't either. But at the same time, there was nowhere else he would rather be. So it kind of we had a short talk about it, and it got to be kind of an understood thing. When we would take off, we went different places. And if we were going this way, I knew he was going to such and such island. If we went this way, I knew we were going to Grand Pass. I kind of knew from which direction. And I would but he never was really sure, where he wanted to go that day. But I would just say, I would look at the compass and go, tell me. That's all I'd have to say is point to the compass. And he would tell me exactly what to put the compass on in case I had to get us back here, from wherever we were coming from. So I didn't worry about it. I knew God would have that, and if I had to give us in, I'd give us in. Not the way it happened, thank goodness, but that's how much he loved fishing. Talking about the camp was his heaven on earth. We had, the Waits came down, a whole John Waite family and the 2 kids. And the day was, they had come down for the World's Fair, I think. And they were spending the day, they spent a couple of days with us, but he wanted to take them out in the Gulf. And just take them out where you don't see land, and it's just so beautiful out there. And if we could have ordered anything, it wouldn't have been any better than it turned out. We always saw dolphin when we would go out. We always saw few. It was like, I asked God, times 1,000. We ended up in, they call it a pod? I can't remember what exactly they call it. There were hundreds and hundreds of them. Daddy just killed the motor. And they were coming at the boat. You reached down and touched them. They were so thick. Once in my life did I see that, and it was that day. And I watched him, the joy he got out of making other people happy, because those kids, and they were just going crazy. He got as much joy out of that as those kids did. One time we were at a place, he was very good friends with several of the professors at the seminary. And they used to come, and periodically, not all the time, but periodically they'd come and Daddy would take them out fishing. They were all good fishing friends. And he came back, I didn't go that time. You men go, well, y'all can take care of each other. So I just stayed home. He came back, he always wore khaki pants. And of course, the ladies all go to see the ice chest. What did they get today? And they had a loaded ice chest. Well, Daddy was walking around in the backyard, and I noticed right about here on the back of his leg, it looked like, what is on your leg? He went, shh. I said, what happened? What was it? Looked like blood, looked like dried blood.
well, you're supposed to, when you're out walking in the water, you're supposed to shuffle your feet, so you won't step on a fish, mainly a stingray. And he said, it was my fault. I said, I don't care if it was your fault or the fish's fault. What happened? And what he had done, he said, I should have been shuffling, and I wasn't. He was chasing a redfish that was doing one of those where it runs back out. He was out around the little island, shell bottom, and he stepped on one, and they turn around and they get you with that knife that's on their back. And I said, you were standing in the water with blood going everywhere? He said, I was fishing. He didn't want me to tell anybody that. It didn't matter. He was fine. He said the best thing to do was stay in that salt water. It's already healed up. So I said, let me look. Go in the workroom and let me look at it. I could see the bone. I mean, it had gone so deep. But he said, there's nothing to be done now. It's going to heal. You know, it's got salt water. So it's fine. Fishing. That was chasing the rat. And I have to say, this last one is just pure funny, and this is under my fun daddy. All the years that we took, you know, friends were down, a group of girls, we started when we were, well, they bought the house when I was 10. So we started little, we grew up as junior high, we were teenagers in our little, and we were skinny in our little bikinis out there laying and getting sun and water skiing. Long after Mother died, Daddy had retired, he moved on, sold the house in Poplarville, moved on down to the coast. I was teaching in, I think I made it to Slidell, and he was retired, knew a lot of people. It wasn't near as built up as it is now, but there were a lot of camps down. There's kind of more of a camp atmosphere than it is now. Some of those homes have come back and they're absolutely gorgeous. But anyway, he was asked to be the head of the water. There was a big water tank, and I don't know what he had to do with being in charge of it. They kind of took turns. In this area, y'all take care of your own water with the city or whatever. Well, he had been asked to do that, so he did. So he has to go from door to door to door and knock on doors, and I'm Joe Powell, and I'm in charge of the water, and you need to pay blah, 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 blah for the city, and he would handle it. He said he got to one door, and he said, you know, when he was introducing himself, I live in the gray house over in the point over there, and he said, this one man looked at him and said, wait, where do you live? And he said, the gray house right before you get into the river. And he said, you're the swinger. And I said, he said, what to you? And he said, he kind of was like, sir? And he said, you've had young girls over at that house for years. He said, yeah, my daughter and her girlfriends. So that was his happy place to be. Y'all, I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you got a little light into Dad's life and what he was like, and he loved Poplarville. He absolutely loved it here. He saw that the camp was his happy place on earth, and it was bittersweet when we sold the house in Poplarville, but it was just way too empty without Mom. And that was his place to be, was on the river. Yes?
I want to ask you a question.
Ask me.
I always wondered about the office, his office. Was that originally a house and they made it into the office? Because it looked like a house.
I think so. And you know, I asked Bob Applewhite, who I stay in touch with Woody and Pam and Bob, years ago when I came to town for something. It was like, where did it go? It's gone. It was just an empty lot. And I happened to go to Apple's next, and I said, Pa, what happened to Daddy's office? Where'd it go? They tear it down? He said, no. He couldn't remember who it was. Somebody bought it, moved it out in the country, and made it their house.
Oh,
I know.
wow.
Was it
How
the
cool is
rock?
that?
No, they got the one at Millard.
So I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I just think it's cool.
I just wondered, how did it start? Was it a house and he?
Oh, well, yes, it was.
I don't know that answer.
The Youngs.
Oh,
lived
okay.
there for a while.
So,
It was a house.
It was a house.
It
do
looks
you know
like
who was in it before?
The Youngs.
I don't remember who
I
was
think
in
the
it, but it
Youngs
was a
had it at
house.
one time.
Huh?
The Youngs.
Mary Young?
I think they lived there at one time.
Well, he had part of it. He only worked in half of it.
Oh, really?
Because he had the other half, if you were looking at it from the front, on the right side, there was a whole other waiting room and 3 examining rooms back there, and a couple of offices that they had done. He thought at one time he was going to be able to get another doctor in with it.
Oh.
It was ready for somebody to walk in, but
Well,
never.
that was during segregation too, so that might have been for the blacks.
I don't know.
I just know,
Yeah,
well, that was in the back of the side he was in. But this was like ready for a whole new, I know he said that he was looking, he thought there was gonna be.
What was the house number that
They
you
were in that house.
were on North Jackson?
506.
Well, she owns 504.
And I can't remember. what
And
it
if
was.
506 ever comes up for sale, call me and I'll re-pray.
Okay.
Because I would love to move back in my house, I really would.
I can't remember where it was. Where was it?
What's that?
I went to
The
it, I
office,
can't remember where it was.
It's where the parking lot.
It's a parking lot there, right by the fire and the water tower.
Yeah, behind the.
They're
church.
behind the
Church
church.
parking lot.
It's a church parking lot now.
That's where it was.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, the
Yeah,
parking
yeah,
lot.
I forgot where it was.
They had one of those chest Coke, thing, and there were ice cold drinks in that, Coca-Cola chest.
Yes, yes.
But they did have two doctors in there after he.
But not two at the same time, you talking?
Yeah.
When
He did.
Dr. Rennick and.
Dr. Rennick bought it from Daddy.
And he had Martin in there at one time.
That I don't know. I was
He had,
not
he had
calling.
two different ones.
And then Dr., with the two nurses that bought our house.
Dr. Hayden.
Hayden, Hayden bought it from Rennick. And Rennick bought it from Daddy. Hayden bought it from them. And then Hayden's two nurses bought our house on 506 North Jackson. And one of them's still there. One of them passed away and one of them's still there. So if 506, get my phone number
I keep
and
driving by there looking for a
let me
sign.
know if 506 North Jackson ever comes open, because I'm coming home. That'll be my sign. You're supposed to go home. Y'all, this has been so much fun. Thank you for allowing me to come. Thank you for being patient and listening, and I just appreciate it so much.
Who was
It's
the
such
doctor-
a
Who
pleasure.
was the doctor here prior to your daddy? Was it Dr. Bertuzzi?
There was a Bertuzzi, there was a Dr. Cowart.
Dr. Davis.
I think it was
I don't remember that.
Dr.
Bertuzzi.
Davis was.
They were
Well,
good
Dr.
before.
He was the first doctor.
Dr. who?
Foster. J.B. Davis, and his daughter was Carol.
I don't remember
Sills.
that.
That was before your dad's time.
Yeah, his daughter was.
Well, and Becky and I were just talking about it, and
And his-
I said, what
and his
year did
daughter
you
was
come
son,
here?
JB.
We were born in 55, and I said, well, Daddy didn't graduate till 53, so he came probably in
Yeah.
53 or 4.
My dad came in 57.
So I was here.
Just a few years back.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mother was seeing the other doctor, or Bertuzzi or whoever, before I was born, and there was some conflict of some sort, and that doctor said, I will deliver that baby. And she said, I know you won't, and so Dr. Powell delivered me at the Lumberton Hospital because there was a conflict, and if she had gone to this hospital, he would have delivered her, so she went to the other hospital so that Dr. Powell delivered. And my family, my dad being a Baptist preacher, my family was one of the ones that he never charged anything. And he was always who we saw.
You was a freebie.
I was a freebie.
Many
They
like
paid
that.
for it every since back.
You know, there were many like that, and I'm so proud of Daddy, because he was in it for all the right reasons. He was in it to care for people, and when I hear something, just today, it's so funny, we went out to eat, and ran into a few people that a couple of people I hadn't seen in 30-something years, and Joe Montgomery walked in. Well, I didn't recognize him. And I said, that's Joe Montgomery. So I went over to say hello, and he said, I know you, but it's been a long time. I said, buddy, it's been a long time. And so we talked for a minute, and I said, Dr. Powell's daughter. Oh, my gosh. And he said, I'll never forget him. He said, I'd be sick, and he said, he'd tell me he'd wait for me. I'd go over there at 5 or 5:30, and he'd give me that steroid shot, and I'd go back to work. I said, yeah, that's pretty much what, he kept stuff in his little back bag. He called it his grip. I have his grip. Wouldn't part with it for anything. And he kept medicine, for people that regularly had to have something. He kept all that in his grip with him. He knew Miss So-and-so needed that, and Luann needs this, and because I had asthma and allergies, and he, many of it he did not charge. And
He gave me a penicillin shot out of that bag one night.
did
Had an infected arm at his house. at your house.
Oh, yeah. It was like a little walking, they were,
Drugstore.
they're real, they're real real. I always think of Lynn Powell, if you remember Lynn.
Oh,
Lynn was one of my
yes.
very, very best
Yes.
friends. Passed away a couple of years ago. And her granddaddy was like deathly allergic to bee stings, And it did not matter when they called, where they called from. If Daddy got a call that he needed, Mr. Powell needed, had been bitten by a bee, Daddy dropped, I watched him, he dropped everything and would fly out there. It didn't wait for them to bring him in, he knew he could get there faster. And to give him whatever it was to counteract, yeah, the adrenaline, to take care of people. And once he moved to the camp after he sold the house in Poplarville, he took care of everybody down there too. All the friends on the street and over on the next street. On the bayou. And he took care of them and for nothing. And kept his license up. Just a really cool man, just my hero. So thank you so much for letting me do it.
Good seeing
I
you
never
too.
sit still, I swear, in my city.
John, tell them about getting
This
on
is a
the.
little happy for you.
Oh, how
It might have wilted a little bit, but
We'll get them perked back up. I love yours. Thank you so much. I love pansies.
About, what is it, they can go online and Facebook, is it Facebook that we're on?
for what? Oh,
On
you
the
mean about the museum? Yes, Carol that left a
Yeah.
minute ago. We are on there, so, and also we are on, the city of Poplarville. They're giving us a plug
Yeah.
before they even tell about what's going on in Poplarville, so we're grateful for that too. But we'd love for the ones of you who are not members to please come and join us. We have a fun group, I think. And it's really interesting what we're trying to do to preserve this
Absolutely.
type of thing. And, but before you leave, we have refreshments in the back. We have coffee and lemonade and drinks and some cookies and some king cake. So please have some refreshments before you go. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.